Around this time every night, or maybe a little bit earlier, I'm in bedtime story mode. And I wanted to share a story with all of you. It was the night before Yom Kippur, and Jacob was left alone. He'd sent his wives and children ahead of him across the river, along with all his possessions, everything. Now he was alone, left alone to think. In the morning, he'd be seeing his brother, Esav, for the first time in 20 years. The last time they saw each other, it didn't go so great, if you remember. Jacob had deceived their father, Isaac, and stolen Esav's birthright and the firstborn deathbed blessing. He did this by impersonating Esav. The last time Jacob saw his brother wanted to kill him. A lot has changed in 20 years. Jacob was married twice. He had 11 kids. He had a ton of animals and servants and possessions. He'd done very well for himself. But still, he had just deceived his father-in-law, Lavan, and run away from him. Kind of like how he deceived his father and his brother and ran from them. So really, how much had really changed after all? It was the night before Yom Kippur, and Jacob was left alone. And the Torah says, and a man wrestled with him until the break of dawn. When he saw that he had not prevailed against him, he wrenched Jacob's hip at its socket, so that the socket of his hip was strained as he wrestled with him. The Torah goes on. I can kind of give it to you in my own version. This mysterious man, the Ish in the Hebrew, says, "Let me go. Dawn is breaking." But Jacob answers, "No, not unless you bless me." The man asks, "What is your name?" "Jacob." "Not anymore," says the man. "From now on, you shall be Israel." Yisrael. And the man says in Hebrew, "Ki sarita im Elohim ve'im anashim vatuchal." For you have struggled with beings, divine and human, and have prevailed. Jacob tries to get the mysterious man's name, but he won't answer him and takes off, leaving Jacob to limp away, forever injured by this bizarre wrestling match. The classic commentators for centuries have been obsessed with this mysterious man. Who is he? Is he an actual man? Is he an angel? Is he God? Or is he a figment of Jacob's imagination? Is he just Jacob wrestling with his own conscience? It seems to me they've actually always been asking an interesting but maybe not helpful question. Maybe we don't so much need to know who, or I suppose the correct word in this situation would be whom, wouldn't it? Does Jacob wrestle with? But rather, what does Jacob wrestle with? Who among us hasn't tossed and turned in bed, lost sleep, as they say, the night before something we're dreading, like having to face someone we've wronged? I think when we hear of Jacob up all night wrestling, we actually know exactly what that's like. Jacob's faceless, to us at least, nameless to all, attacker is all his baggage, isn't it? 20 years of insecurity and fear and shame. It's the memory of lying and cheating and stealing from his own brother, from his own blind and dying father. He's wrestling with his selfishness, his cowardice, his con man-like behavior. And he's wrestling with his doubts and his fears about himself, about who he is as a man and where he falls short. By now, of course, you've realized this isn't some Yom Kippur fable I've come up with. We know this story well from the Torah. Now, you may also be thinking, wait a second, Yom Kippur wasn't around yet in the time of Jacob. And you'd be right. But according to the Zohar, the seminal work of Kabbalah, this moment, this turning point moment for Jacob happened on Erev Yom Kippur, tonight, just a few thousand years ago. And of course it did. It makes sense to me. That line I gave you in Hebrew from the story, Ki sarita im Elohim v'im anashim batuchal. Another way you could translate it and still be right is, for you have struggled with God and with men. Struggling with God and struggling with other humans, what could really be more Yom Kippur than that? Plus, we wrestle with things all year long. I know this. I hear about it from many people. Things come up at different points throughout the year, from this Yom Kippur to next. Things that leave us sleepless in bed, replaying situations over and over in our heads, grappling with our demons, both real and emotional. I've heard it all, as I mentioned. Problems at work, or losing a job, or not being able to find a job. Problems in a relationship, or a broken heart, or struggling to find love. Problems with family or with friends. The death of someone we loved, or another trauma in our lives. These days, maybe it's the uncertainty and fear of this pandemic, a fluid situation that often has us feeling like we're going backwards sometimes instead of forwards. Or, like we talked just last week on Rosh Hashanah, wrestling with change, wrestling with doing what's right. Erev Yom Kippur is a night for wrestling, if there ever was one. It's the night we wrestle with sin, with the worst parts of ourselves and the worst parts of our past, the moments that haunt us and the moments we've often kept buried because of how difficult they are to deal with, or maybe the moments we've run from, just like Jacob in his past. Erev Yom Kippur is certainly a night for struggling with God and with other humans. But as we get back to Jacob, isn't it interesting when we look closely again at his story that he doesn't actually win his fight? He doesn't really defeat his opponent. In fact, he's injured. He gets beat up a little. I guess you could say you should see the other guy. But the point is, he doesn't let his opponent beat him. And at one moment, his opponent can't get away, as Jacob demands a blessing from him for his efforts. I guess you could say that at the end of that long night of fighting, Jacob emerges okay. And just okay. But sometimes, as a good friend of mine put to me only quite recently, sometimes these days, okay is winning it. The point of Jacob's story was not trying to win. It wasn't even trying to escape unharmed. Jacob does limp forever after. The point was Jacob had to face, for the first time, his challenge head on and never give up. To not run away like he had in the past or give in to fear and doubt, but to face it. In fact, the word face, panim, is mentioned in and out throughout this episode and leading up to it. And in the end, as Jacob limps away, he calls the place Peniel, the face of God. Jacob claims in the moment in the Torah, the name comes because he saw God face to face, panim el panim, and miraculously survived. You see, people who saw God weren't supposed to be able to live. Obviously, Jacob thinks he's wrestled with an angel or some divine being. What he doesn't even realize is the real test was coming face to face, panim el panim, with his past, with his own deficiencies and sins, and vowing in that moment not to let go, but to change. No matter how hard it is and no matter how much it hurt him, even in the long run. Confronting our own demons on Erev Yom Kippur, Jacob serves as our inspiration and our hope. That even if we come away limping, the struggle within ourselves, this fight, is certainly worth it. In fact, it's the only way we can change. As Jacob limps away, he becomes Yisrael. And the very next day, after he does in fact reconcile with his brother, we're told he walks away shalem, which means in peace, but also whole, in spite of the injuries he suffered. Wishing you all Gamar Chatima Tova. May we all be inscribed for another year together in the book of life.